Camera and scene layout is an essential part of any production. I've got a very simple scene here, but nevertheless, it's a good idea for me to put things onto layers so that I can hide things or I can freeze them to make them untouchable. For example, I might want to animate the logo, but not move the backdrop objects. Let's take a look at display layers. I'll open up the Manage Layers dialog either by going to the Tools menu and choosing Manage Layers, or I can go over to the main toolbar and click on the button Manage Layers. Now I've got a window here, and I've got one layer currently, the default layer, and it's currently active, as indicated by this little checkbox here. What I'd like to do is to create a new layer for the backdrop objects. What I'll do is I'll highlight these two, the sphere and the plane, and they're not actually selected in the viewport. They're just highlighted in this panel here, in this window. I'll need to select them by clicking this button. Select highlighted objects and layers. Now they're actually selected. Then I can click this button here that says Create New Layer Containing Selected Objects. And when I do that, a new layer is built and those two objects are placed within it. I'll rename it. I'll call this one Backdrop Layer. When a layer is built, it's made active by default. This is the current layer. I can go ahead and hide everything on that layer by just clicking the Hide column here. I can also freeze everything on that layer. And when it's frozen, by default, it'll be displayed in gray. Turn that back off again. If I need to move things from one layer to another, I can do that through a sort of cumbersome process. I can't just drag and drop from one layer to another. And I can't really effectively cut and paste because I can only cut and paste one object at a time. And obviously for a heavy scene with thousands of objects, that's really not practical. What I'll need to do if I want to move objects from one layer to another is highlight them in the window here and then select them. Then I'll highlight the name of the destination layer and press this plus sign, Add Selected Objects to Highlighted Layer. And now they're moved into the other layer. I'll just move those back. Select, then select the target layer name and press the plus sign. Now they've been moved back. Let's talk about hiding. If I hide a layer, then the objects won't be displayed. There's one thing about 3ds Max here that can kind of trip you up, which is that the active layer, or the one that has a checkbox, is the one in which new objects will be placed. If I create a new object now, then it'll be placed into this backdrop layer. But that layer is hidden. If I go and create a primitive like a sphere here, then I won't see it because it's being placed into a hidden layer. And if I unhide that layer, now I can see the sphere. The solution to this is immediately after you make a new layer, then you want to click on the default layer and make that one active. And that way, new objects will not be hidden. Delete that. Now let's talk about freezing. If I freeze a layer, then it's untouchable. I can't select it and therefore I can't move it. That's very helpful, especially for these backdrop objects. However, by default, frozen objects and frozen layers are displayed in gray, and I can't see the texture on the object. I'll unfreeze it, and what I'll do is I'll change an option so that frozen objects will not be displayed in gray. I can set that on a per object or a per layer basis. I'd like to set it on a per layer basis in this case. I'll right-click on the layer and choose Layer Properties. On the left-hand side of this dialog, you'll see Display Properties, and there's an option here that says Show Frozen in Gray. I will turn that off. And then when I click OK, I would expect that if I freeze this layer, then I would still see the texture on my backdrop. However, that's not the case because the default installation of 3ds Max gives priority to object properties. If you're using 3ds Max Design, or if you've chosen one of the design templates in the Customize UI and Defaults switcher, then you will get layer properties taking priority. But again, the default 3ds Max install gives priority to object properties. But we can switch that. I want to select these two objects and actually fully select them, and then right-click anywhere and go to Object Properties. And for each one of these sections here, you'll see a button here that says By Object. That button is displaying the current state. In other words, it's telling me that the display properties are giving objects priority. And if I click on that button, then for the currently selected objects, their priority will be by layer. And with that having been done, now if I click Freeze, the objects are still displayed in their normal color and their normal texture, but they're now untouchable, and I can't actually mess up my scene accidentally. If you want to change this behavior and give priority to layer properties, you can do that from the Customize Preferences dialog. And you want to go to the Layer Defaults, and that's found in the General tab. General, Layer Defaults, default to by layer for new nodes. A node is an object. If that switch is on, then all new objects will have their display properties priority set to by layer. And then I won't need to go in there and change each one of those each time. That's a real brief introduction to managing layers in 3ds Max. It's important that you place objects of the same type onto display layers so that you can hide or freeze them all at once.